Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar on commercial compliance pathways. This webinar is recorded, and the recording's usually posted in a couple of weeks following the session, so keep an eye out for that on the Code Adoption Toolkit. If there are any issues with audio, feel free to write me in the chat. My name is Erica DeLello. I'm a project manager for NORESCO. This series is sponsored by the Colorado Energy Office with training materials created by Group 14. Okay, so we've been working with the Colorado Energy Office to put on trainings just like this one. As you can see, we added a whole slew of additional webinars coming up on our Wednesday webinar series. And so definitely register for those. That went out in our email outreach yesterday. We also launched, which I'm not showing on the screen, a heat pump series. It's 3 sessions, so I'll put in the link in the chat for you guys to register for that as well if you're interested. In addition to webinars, we offer role-based trainings. So what that means is basically looking at energy code compliance through the eyes of an architect, engineer, inspector, plans examiner, you name it. We're trying to create these presentations so it's specific to a role and how they need to approach the energy code. We also offer tailored group trainings and technical assistance for code adoption. So if you're a jurisdiction looking to adopt the 2021 IECC or the 2024 IECC, we're here to support you guys. We offer a bunch of free services to help you get across the finish line. And if you are adopting an energy code, we can also support the entire suite of I-codes with that adoption. Mentioned the Code Adoption Toolkit. There's a bunch of resources. It's sorted by role and what's applicable, but then there's also one of my favorite resources is the Colorado Codes Helpline, and we can answer questions on any of the building codes or state model codes, you name it. We're here to support you guys if you have a question on how code applicability, or if you're even just a homeowner that's looking how to understand how to navigate updates within your own home, we're here to answer those questions. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Anna, who will be our presenter today.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I want to apologize for my voice. Dealing with some toddler germs over here. So just lots of throat clearing and this hopefully very soothing voice that you're going to hear today. Today we'll be talking about the 2024 IECC commercial compliance pathways. We're not going to be talking about prescriptive requirements or mandatory requirements within sections C402 through C405. We're really going to be talking about sections C406 and C407 and ASHRAE. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Anna McCullough. I work for Group 14 Engineering as an energy modeler. Also very involved in the codes development process and very involved with Colorado's model low carbon code. So if you have any questions about any of the energy codes, I'm happy to answer them. So like I said, the first pathway we're going to talk through today is the prescriptive pathway. So not necessarily diving into the nitty-gritty of what is prescribed in the 2024 IECC code. We're focusing on sections C406 and C407 and how those pathways compare. The second topic we'll talk through is the performance pathway, section C407. And then the third topic is ASHRAE 90.1 2022 in comparison to the 2024 IECC. ASHRAE 90.1 2022 is listed within the base code of the 2024 IECC as an approved compliance pathway, both through section 12. I know that sounds like I'm saying it's incorrect, but it is now section 12. It used to be section 11 and appendix G. So we'll talk through both of those. This is a lot of content to talk through today. So we will be moving pretty quick. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat or the Q&A, and we will keep an eye on it. I'm going to try my best to have some time left over. If we don't have time left over, my email will be in the last slide, and you guys can always email me your questions that you have. So sorry. So first of all, the prescriptive method. We are all used to ComCheck. ComCheck still exists as a pathway. You have the mandatory requirements that are listed in the code. We also have still the UA calculation and lighting trade-offs that are allowed within the code. And then we have section C406. I am, sorry, that popped up and surprised me. I am not, I am hopeful that you all have taken a pass through section C406. So the next slide that I show you isn't super terrifying. The way that section C406 works now is that we have additional energy efficiency requirements in a point system that we were used to in the 2021 IECC, but now that point system is divided up by climate zone and building occupancy type. I do, so as we get into section C406, we're going to talk through the different compliance pathways for different building types. I made this chart. This is a long section in the code that talks about which types of buildings can comply with which sections of C406, and C406 itself is now at least 50 pages long. So I tried to break this out. This does not cover every single pathway that's available if you are a TI or if you are core and shell, for example. But I covered what I think are the most common types of construction here. So if you are a 2,000 square foot new construction building, or greater than 2,000 square foot, you are only required to comply with section C406.1.1. If you are greater than 5,000 square feet, you have to comply with both C406.1.1 and C406.1.2. And if you are a build-out construction greater than 1,000 square feet, you are required to comply with C406.1.1.2. And we'll talk about what all of those are, but this gives you just like a good little snapshot of what the code requirements are that hopefully you can reference when you're trying to figure out where you fall within section C406. Okay. So there are exceptions to these required credits per climate zone and occupancy type. Those exceptions are for portions of buildings that are devoted to manufacturing or industrial use. And then the other exception that is a little bit difficult, can be a little bit tricky to think about, is the surplus renewable and load management credits can offset required energy efficiency credits with limits. We'll talk through what those limits are. You can also use surplus energy efficiency credits to offset renewable and load management credits. So let's talk about what those are. Table C 406.1.11 are the energy credit requirements by building occupancy group. So these are the number of credits within the energy efficiency categories that your building is going to be required to achieve. So if we look at, for example, a multifamily commercial building in climate zone 5B, you're going to have to achieve 90 credits within the energy efficiency categories. Now, we also have what we were talking about before with the limit to the energy efficiency credit carryover from the renewable and load management credits. there is now a secondary section within C406 that is also mandatory. And these are the renewable and load management credits. We'll talk through what those credits are and what are available. But if you achieve more than the credits required within renewable and load management, if we're still talking about that commercial multifamily building in climate zone 5B, you can only count 5 additional credits. 5 credits from the renewable and load management group can count towards the 90 credits that we talked about in this chart. So it starts to get a little bit difficult to understand where those credits are coming from. But the best way I can describe it is when you're thinking about the renewable and load management credits, these are credits that are talking about obviously on-site renewables. We're talking about peak energy reductions in terms of building mass or HVAC set point adjustments, lighting power reductions. We'll talk through them. But all of those credits, all of those energy efficiency items that talk about reducing peak loads or on-site renewables, you can only achieve a certain amount of credits and have them count towards this 90. They don't want to just have a building, put a ton of renewables on the roof and have it count towards all 90 points is essentially what they're trying to achieve there. Now, the renewable and load management credits that you are required to achieve are listed in this table. So here we have again that commercial multifamily building that's in climate zone 5B. We're going to have to achieve 33 renewable and load management credits. If you provided so much solar, for example, that you were achieving 38 points, those extra 5 could count towards your energy efficiency credits. I know that was a very quick overview for how the entire section is structured, but hopefully that gives you some good insight into what's required. I do want to note that these renewable and load management credits are mandatory. So what that means is that if you are complying via section C406, via the ComCheck method, prescriptive method, or you're complying via section C407, you have to comply with this table. You're going to have to provide some of those load management reduction strategies or on-site renewables. And we'll talk through what all of those strategies are. What I did not include in this presentation is what credits can be used in conjunction with others. So we're going to talk through each credit category, but there are limits to which credits can be combined. So for example, credit E02, component performance envelope reduction, cannot be achieved with credits E01, E04, E05, or E06. So as you all are selecting the correct pathway for your project, you need to pay attention to what credits are available to be used with other credits in that section. I will try and call them out as I start working through them, but there are quite a few, particularly within the HVAC and service water heating and lighting. Every section has credits that cannot be combined. But you almost need like a spreadsheet to be able to look at what credits can be combined with other credits to keep it all straight, because it does start to get a little bit tricky. So now we're going to talk through what all of these credits are that are available to you. So we'll start here, and as we go through, please, if you put questions in the chat, I'll try and keep my eye on it. I do have the 2024 open, so if we need to look at specific code language, we can. I summarized it here. There are details within this code language that are not included here. Particularly when we start getting to the lighting and we're talking about occupancy occupancy sensor timing and adding additional occupancy sensors. I didn't include the timing for all of those occupancy sensors. So some of those minute details are within the code language, but I'm happy to pull that up if you all need it. Sorry, 1 minute. Okay, we're back. So our first one is a doozy. This is improved envelope performance using ASHRAE 90.1 Appendix C. Um, Basically, what we are doing is we are showing that the envelope has been improved compared to a prescribed envelope using the calculation method listed in ASHRAE 90.1 2022 Appendix C. Credit E02 is component performance envelope reduction. So this component performance of this credit allows you to show that your building thermal envelope is not less than 15% below, right? A lower U factor is better. The component performance envelope, component performance listed in section C402.1.4. So we have that if you have essentially a 15% reduction in the overall UA of your opaque building envelope is how you achieve these credits. Reduced air leakage. This one is a little bit interesting to me because it doesn't talk about, well, we'll talk about it first. This is tested air leakage is not less than 10% of the maximum leakage permitted by section C402.6.2. I expect that there will be some language revision that comes out in the second printing of the 2024 IECC on this one. Can you all still hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, it says another Anna McCullough joined, so I don't know. Maybe there's someone else who has joined that has my name. So I expect that what they mean here is that the tested air leakage is not less than 90% of the maximum leakage permitted by section C402.6.2. There is not a note within this section of what to do if the tested building does not achieve these credits. My gut is that your AHJ is going to say, you need to find your credits elsewhere because you couldn't achieve these. But there isn't any information around remediation if these credits are not achieved and how you move forward in that case, right? We can say during permit that we're going to achieve these credits, but obviously this is a post-construction credit that needs to be proven. So a little bit difficult there, I think, to determine what the pathway forward is if this air leakage, if our air leakage does not meet this standard. Credit E04 is added roof insulation. These credits are achieved by providing an additional R10 roof insulation if you have continuous roof insulation above deck, or R13 if your roof insulation is interrupted by joists. Added wall insulation. This credit is achieved if not less than 90% of all opaque wall areas have an additional R5 continuous insulation above what is prescribed within section C402. E06 requires improved fenestration. There is a table broken out by climate zone that sets U factors and solar heat gain coefficients as well as visible transmittance for your 4 different climate zones. The area weighted U factors and solar heat gain coefficients of all your glazing must meet those U factors and solar heat gain coefficients listed in the table. There are reduced number of credits available within section E06 if, for example, only 80% of your glazing achieves the U factors and solar heat gain coefficient listed in the table. There's a lot of credits, so I don't have things like the tables in here. I've got about almost 50 slides to get through, so there's a lot of information here. So that's it for envelope credits that are available. The next section is HVAC. So now we're in section C406.2.2. H01 is the HVAC total system performance ratio, TSPR. So the TSPR has been added as a compliance pathway for section C403, which is your HVAC efficiency. TSPR is a calculation that is done using a program that essentially calculates your building's total HVAC expected performance as compared to a code prescribed building. So we cannot use an energy model to calculate a TSPR. It is a special program created by DOE. And credits are achieved within section H01. I'm going to call it section H01. That's not what it's called, but it's faster than saying C406.2.2.1. So then credit H01 by showing savings within your TSPR. TSPR is not a substitution for C407 compliance modeling. What it does is it allows you to model certain HVAC systems, not all HVAC systems and not all building types, to calculate kind of based on the building stock and some other factors, what the mechanical efficiency is of your building. If that pathway is used for section C403 rather than just complying with those mandatory HVAC efficiencies that are listed in section C403, you can go after this credit in H01 because you will have had that modeling done. H02 is more efficient HVAC heating performance. Equipment must exceed the minimum heating efficiency requirements listed in section C403 by not less than 5%. And again, if you achieve additional efficiency or, 80% of your equipment achieves that 5% efficiency, there is some variation allowed within the credits achieved based on calculating the amount of additional efficiency that has been achieved. Section H03 is the same as H02, except for its cooling. So equipment must exceed the minimum cooling efficiency requirements by not less than 5%. H04 is residential HVAC control. So what this is we are all used to what is required in hotel rooms. You have a key card system at your front door or the door to the hotel room or occupancy sensors within your hotel room that set back the HVAC temperature. This credit allows you to achieve, or section H04 allows you to achieve credits for implementing that system within residential units, within dwelling or sleeping units. This can be occupancy controlled or it can be some sort of entryway switch, or I assume it wouldn't be a key card system, but some sort of entryway switch that brings your HVAC up to comfort settings. Your HVAC systems are required to set back by 5 degrees for both heating and cooling. Section H05 is a dedicated outdoor air system. This one gets complex. There are a lot of qualifiers in this section. This requires a DOAS with an enthalpy recovery ratio of 65% or more, must be providing ventilation to your zones. It has to be ducted separately to your zones to achieve this credit. If you have zone equipment, so for example, I'm thinking of like a VRF system with fan coil units that are serving the zones, and then we have our DOAS that is ventilating those zones. Those fan coil units are required to turn off when there is no heating or cooling required, and the DOAS would be providing ventilation. Again, there are a lot of qualifiers within this around economizer and additional requirements that you would need to definitely make sure you read through before deciding if this is an appropriate path for your building. But again, it does require that enthalpy recovery ratio of 65% and separate ducting to all your zones. That's it for HVAC. We got a question, who does the TSPR program modeling? I do not know, to be honest, I do not do it. I believe that your HVAC design engineers would do the TSPR modeling. I don't think you're going to, I think that's something that they would do to show compliance with Section C 403 rather than using an energy model or using the mandatory measures. That's a good question. It's a question I've asked a bunch of HVAC engineers and they all say, well, I don't know. So the industry will figure it out one way or the other. But again, the TSPR, that is not a mandatory now within the code. It is an alternate compliance pathway for Section C 403. So we can still comply traditionally using ComCheck and meeting those mandatory efficiencies listed in Section C 403. But now we also have TSPR available. Now we are in Section C 406.2.3, reduced energy use in service water heating. So the first section, W01, is recovered or renewable water heating. On-site recovered or renewable water heating, you have to have enough capacity for not less than 30% of the building's annual hot water requirements. That on-site recovered or renewable water heating could be a heat pump water heater using, I guess that's the wrong way to say it, some sort of chiller heater where we're using excess heat to preheat domestic hot water coming in. You could be using drain water heat recovery. You could be using solar hot water. Any of those items would qualify as recovered or renewable water heating. Then W02 gives you credits for having an efficient heat pump water heater. So you have to meet certain efficiency requirements, and your heat pump has to provide at least 30% of the design end-use service water heating requirements at an ambient condition of 67.5 degrees. So, typically when we're looking at heat pump water heaters for buildings, we're designing them for the full capacity of the building. You could provide a smaller heat pump water heating system and achieve these credits as long as it achieves 30% of the design and use service water heating requirements. And that temperature isn't cold, so you don't have to worry about having a low ambient kit on that heat pump water heater. Efficient fossil fuel water heater, and under section W03, there are credits available for providing a combined weighted average efficiency for all gas water heating equipment, not less than 95% or a 0.93 UEF. So condensing domestic hot water heaters, you get a few points there. I did not include what adds a bunch of length to section C 406 is how many credits are available from each of these sections within your climate zone and your occupancy type. There are, how many climate zones are there? 8, not including the A's and B's. A lot of charts. that you have to reference based on climate zone and occupancy type to bring together make sure you're meeting that number of points. I will note that there are typically more credits available for heat pump water heaters than the section W03, the efficient fossil fuel water heater. Section W04, service hot water piping insulation increase. If you provide hot water pipe at least 1.5 times the thickness that's required within section C404, you could achieve these credits. These credits, sorry, we got another question. I get excited when I get questions. These credits are only required for new construction, correct? Would existing buildings would not need to comply? That's a great question. And we'll get to that. We'll talk about that at the end and how this applies to existing buildings, because it depends if you are, going for a TI, for a building that has already been, permitted under the 2024 IECC and their compliance pathway. So all of that kind of folds in. And ASHRAE, if we don't have time during this presentation to get to that, shoot me an email. You'll see my contact information at the end, and we can talk through it. W05 point of use water heaters this credit is only available for group B or E occupancies larger than 5,000 square feet. And there are a few qualifiers in here, but essentially if you are providing point of use water heaters with the required insulation from section C404, and you are a B or E occupancy, you could get these credits, achieve these credits. Section W06, thermostatic balancing valves. Each branch return connection to the main service hot water supply piping must have an automatic thermostatic balancing valve that balances based on a temperature of 120 degrees. Credit W07, the heat trace system. So this is interesting. This is not, when I first read it, I thought it was going to be some sort of like energy savings around if you have heat trace that is being provided in your building for exterior piping. It is not that. It is heat trace to replace standby losses on central service hot water systems for projects greater than 10,000 square feet. So essentially, if you have a bunch of service hot water that's sitting in your distribution piping, that temperature within the service hot water or your domestic hot water starts to fall, the heat trace would kick on and heat those pipes back up. I guess I shouldn't say, heat the water back up. In an effort to reduce people running their taps until they get hot water if the system hasn't been operating. Credit W08 water heating system submeters. You achieve credits for each individual dwelling unit in an R2 occupancy being served by a central service water heating system, providing them with a submeter that meters their domestic hot water use, not just their domestic water use, domestic hot water use. And again, this is only in a building served by a central service water heating system. And then credit W09 service hot water flow reduction allows for low credits to be achieved for providing low flow rates for lavs and shower heads and kitchen sinks in dwelling units, sleeping units, and guest rooms. This is a good example of somewhere where you cannot achieve all of these credits. You cannot achieve points from W07, W08, and W09 altogether. You would have to pick one. And the same, add W10 to that list. Section W10, shower drain heat recovery. Cold water serving showers must be preheated by shower drain heat recovery. So this is you're using the hot water that you have running down your drain out of your shower. um, wrapping your domestic cold water around that um, drain pipe before it comes up and feeds into your shower. Um, there is an exception within this credit that I thought was a good idea for any showers that are on the ground floor, knowing that now you don't have a vertical pipe below your shower, you have an angle. We're not going to have as efficient of heat transfer when we have a shower drain pipe that is running horizontally. I'm so sorry, I almost knocked over my water bottle. That's it for surface water heating. And Erica did note in the chat that there are 2 existing building sessions later this year for 2024 as well, ASHRAE. So those would be really helpful to attend. Oops. Section C406.2.4, there is a credit available for P01 energy monitoring. Energy monitoring is still mandatory within the 2024 IECC. There's credit available for installing an energy monitoring system for projects that are not already required to install one. Same requirements. The energy monitoring system has to meet the same requirements that are listed in section C405, particularly around I'm so sorry. This will be, and Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, but this will be sent out to the PowerPoint, and the presentation will be sent out to everyone.
Yep, that's correct. That it'll be uploaded to the code adoption toolkit.
Great. So for projects that are not required under section C405 to install an energy monitoring system, which is monitoring end uses around, domestic hot water, HVAC, on-site PV, vehicle charging, if that's included, all of those would be sub-metered, and you would gain a point or gain a credit for that. C406.2.5, energy savings and lighting systems. So section L01 is reserved. There is no credit available at this time. I didn't want to skip it and have you guys say that I skipped one in my presentation, so it's blank for now. L02, high-end trim lighting controls. So these are general lighting in qualifying spaces are controlled by high-end trim lighting controls, which means you have lighting controls that limit the amount of power that is provided to your lighting fixtures. So a lot of times we see these in, oh man, my sick brain got to me and I forgot the word. But we're going to see these, and we see them a lot in schools and offices, just to reduce the amount of power that's being provided to the long LED systems of lights that I cannot think of the name of. I will think of it about 10 minutes after this presentation ends. Those just essentially we're providing a little bit less lighting, saving quite a bit of energy by not providing 100% of the power to those lighting fixtures. L03, increase in occupancy sensors. Additional space types are provided with occupancy sensors. So there's a whole list within this section L03 of all the different space types that you would be required to provide occupancy sensors in to achieve credit with this section. It is spaces like barber shops. That's the one that jumped out of me that I remember off the top of my head, but some kind of random spaces that typically aren't required to be provided with occupancy sensors. L04, increased daylight area. So this one was interesting. The total daylight area of the building must be at least 5% greater than the typical daylight area from table C406.2.5.4. So this is a table that shows, based on your building size and occupancy type, the average amount of daylight area that is provided. And you show that your building has at least 5% greater than that area. So it was interesting. It wasn't one that I would have thought of. But it was interesting in that they went through and kind of looked at all this building stock and said, for a 10,000 square foot office, 20% of the floor area, occupied floor area is typically daylit. So if you show that you are at 45%, then you would gain these credits. L05 residential light control. In R2 occupancies, some common area space types have occupancy sensor controls. This is the requirement. Receptacles in each living room and sleeping room must be controlled by a light switch, and lights and receptacles in bathrooms and kitchens must be controlled by an occupant sensor. So you're having occupancy sensor controls within some common area spaces in the building, not within your unit. You have occupancy controls provided within bathrooms and kitchens for lighting, and then at least one receptacle in each living room area and sleeping area must be controlled by a light switch. So encouraging people to turn off their lights when they're not in the space. And then lastly, credit L06, reduced lighting power. The connected interior lighting power must be 95% or less than the interior lighting power allowance from section C405 on a space-by-space method. Okay, we're almost through a section. Well, that's a lie. We're not. We got a ways to go. C406.2.6, efficient equipment credits. Q01, efficient elevator equipment. Elevators must meet an efficiency standard. And this credit is only available if your building is 3 stories or more. I have not talked with an elevator rep to see if this efficiency standard is difficult to achieve. It was not a standard listed in ASHRAE 90.1. I believe it's an ISO standard. But you get credit for installing that efficient elevator. Efficient commercial kitchen equipment. So this has, there's a bunch of tables, and we were used to this in the 2021 IECC as well, providing that efficient kitchen equipment, whether it is electric or natural gas, if you must meet the minimum efficiency requirements in tables C406.2.6.2, through table 4. So there's 4 tables there, the efficiency requirements for commercial kitchen equipment. Q03, efficient residential kitchen equipment. Residential kitchen equipment must achieve the Energy Star Most Efficient 2021 label, including, that includes stoves, refrigerators, dishwashers, maybe microwaves as well. Q04, fault detection and diagnostics. So within section C403.2.3, any building that is 100,000 square feet or larger is required to have a fault detection and diagnostic system under the 2024 IECC. Now this credit is available if you are less than 100,000 square feet. You can gain a credit for installing a fault detection and diagnostic system on all of your HVAC systems. Okay. We're into renewable and load management. Give me 1 minute, so sorry. Okay. So as we know, in the 2024 IECC, section C405.15 mandates renewable energy. There is a credit available under the renewable and load management. So now if we think back to the beginning of the presentation where we talked about the energy efficiency credits, that was our multifamily building in climate zone 5B, it was 90 credits. And then we talked about the renewable and load management credits that are mandatory for section C406 and C407. We had to achieve 33 credits for our multifamily building in climate zone 5B. These are where those 33 credits are going to come from. It's a much shorter list. There are credits available within renewable energy. You have to provide a minimum capacity of 0.1 watts per gross square foot of building area, not conditioned gross. Um, you, oh, and that is parentheses, excluding the mandatory renewables that are required per section C 405.15. So, you can gain credit for providing above what is required in section C 405.15. Section G01, lighting load management. So here's where we start talking about reducing the peak building loads. This is installing demand responsive lighting controls for a percentage of the floor area. It differs on what percentage of the floor area based on occupancy group. And it must control your lighting to not more than 80% of the full output available. Within these and I'm going to say it once, so I don't have to say it every time we talk about a load management credit. 15 minutes left. We haven't. Whew. But within these load management credits, the number of credits available changes if you install the system and you don't have a utility that provides the demand response program. The number of credits that you can achieve changes. So that's something to keep in mind, that you can't just achieve all of the credits for installing this lighting load management system if the utility that's providing your power does not have a demand response program available. You would achieve fewer credits. Yeah. G02 HVAC load management. It's an automatic load management control to shift cooling and heating temperatures by 3 degrees over a minimum of 3 hours, and or reduce the outdoor air by 30% when your maximum outdoor air isn't required. G03 automated shading load management. You get credits for automatic exterior shading devices or dynamic glazing that can reduce solar gain through sunlit fenestration by not less than 50% when fully closed. There are lesser credits available for automatic interior shading devices. G04 electric energy storage. You're going to achieve credits for providing batteries that can be charged and discharged by automatic load management controls based on the building's peak load. The minimum capacity of that electric energy storage system is required to be 1.5 watt hours per square foot of gross building area. G05 cooling energy storage. Again, automatic load management controls to activate ice or chilled water storage equipment. Credits are prorated based on your system size. So if your chilled water storage system is 40% of your total peak chilled water capacity, peak chilled water load, you would achieve different credits than if it was 80%. G06, service hot water energy storage, automatic load management controls to preheat the service hot water before a peak period and suspend heating during that peak period. So you heat your water up to a warmer temperature and don't allow your electric storage water heater to run during your peak energy use period. And then G07, building thermal mass, is providing additional passive interior mass and night flush control of your HVAC system. This credit is only available to projects that have at least 80% gross floor area unoccupied between midnight and 6 a.m. Okay, now we're going to start screaming through these slides. Thought I was going fast before. The IECC performance method. So we talked through all of those credits. We talked about how the renewable and load management credits are mandatory. We are used to, in the 2021 IECC, 20% annual energy cost savings required. Now our percent savings is going to be based on the number of points that are the number of energy efficiency points required in section C406. You must meet the mandatory efficiency, I'm sorry, the mandatory measures listed in the base code, provide your whole building annual hourly energy model. You're comparing it still against a standard reference design. But now your annual energy cost savings are going to range from 21% to 25.6%, depending on the number of energy efficiency credits that are listed in section C406. The modeling protocol changed a little bit, and I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty because we don't have much time left. But it still allows for a trade-off between envelope lighting and HVAC, and allows you to have more flexibility in design. A big note that I want to point out here that changed is that there you can count additional renewables that are provided above and beyond what is required in section C405.15 can count towards annual energy cost savings. Previously, we were used to only being able to provide 5% of the standard reference designs annual energy cost in renewable energy savings. And now that limit has been increased. And we can, as long as it is above and beyond what was required in 405.15, you can count it within the energy model. Sorry for going so fast through that. We're going to get through ASHRAE 90.1 2022 as well. ASHRAE 90.1 2022 also now has these additional efficiency requirements. Previously, we didn't have them, and so this is a big change. This has become section 11. So whereas previously section 11 was the energy cost budget method, that has now become section 12. And section 11 of ASHRAE 90.1 2022 are these additional energy efficiency credits. You will note that these credits are much less than what was required in the multifamily climate zone 5B. Now we're only required to have 50 points. The base code of ASHRAE 90.1 is different than IECC as well. So there are some changes that need to be weighed when you are selecting a compliance pathway, but ASHRAE 90.1 2022 is still available. For performance compliance, we have section 12, the energy cost budget, or the appendix G performance rating method based off of performance cost index. Within section 12, the cost, your annual energy cost must be less than or equal to the baselines, your energy cost budget, but your energy cost budget is reduced by the number of credits that are required in section 11. So when we talk about this equation, we are reducing our energy cost budget by 3.1 to 5% based on the number of credits that I showed you in that last table. So again, a little bit different than what we're seeing in section C407, but still tied to the level of efficiency that's required in section 11 and section C406. The big note on this and the big change here, we still have the mandatory requirements that are required to be met within section 12. And I'm sorry, that still says section 11. I got really used to typing section 11. The building envelope must not exceed the baseline envelope performance factor by more than 7 to 15% based on your occupancy type. So what this is saying is that we don't want to show energy efficiency within our proposed building through lighting and HVAC only. You can't just not provide insulation on your building. We can see a slight reduction in the building's overall UA as compared to what's prescribed in the base code, but we cannot be reduced by more than 7 to 15% based on your occupancy type. You are only allowed a 5% contribution from on-site renewables. On-site renewables within ASHRAE 90.1 2022 are prescriptive, not mandatory. So if you are complying with section 12, you can count any renewables on site up to 5% of your energy cost budgets, annual energy cost. And then within Appendix G, the mandatory requirements are required. We have that same requirement around the building's UA. around that. You cannot exceed the baseline envelope performance factor by more than 7 to 15%. The big difference in Appendix G is that we are looking at a stable baseline approach, which means in climate zones 4B and colder, we're comparing against a natural gas baseline. Right now, Appendix G is written so that we are looking at annual energy cost. So we are comparing the cost of a natural gas building against the cost of our design, which can be very difficult for all electric buildings or buildings that use electricity for heating to show compliance with. Um, I won't get into the kind of nitty-gritty details of this, but there are building performance factors within the compliance pathways section of ASHRAE 90.1 that help you calculate what your performance cost index target is. And again, we're using that natural gas baseline. The baseline is always going to be the same in our climate zone based on your type of occupancy. Only on-site renewables within Appendix G, only on-site renewables greater than the prescribed renewables in Section 10.5 count towards compliance. Those prescriptive renewables line up with the mandatory renewables listed in Section C405.15. I am so sorry that went so fast. There's a lot of content to cover, but we have 5 minutes. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If your questions are a little bit more in depth, I'm also happy to answer them via email or phone. You can shoot me an email or give me a call. And yeah, I read the code all day long. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks so much, Anna. That was great. I know it was a lot of information, but we will post those slides in the recording. So Anna, if you could send me the slides when you get a chance, that'd be great. But if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to write them in the chat, Q&A, or raise your hand and ask it directly. So Anna and I will stay on the line for another few minutes if any questions do come through. Okay, first question. Do you know if the state is looking into renewable requirements for mobile homes?
I do not. So I can look at that. Drew, if you shoot me an email, I can look at what's in the draft right now for the model low carbon code, I think is what you're talking about, and see what the requirements are there.
I'm not
In
sure. I'm sorry. I'm just not sure if that would apply specifically to mobile homes. I think. Do you know? We can look into it too. But also Drew, yeah, like a manufactured
manufactured China.
mobile home kind of falls under a slightly different category than say a single family. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure if those would apply, but you also have the resource of the helpline too. If you do decide to submit a question, we can touch base with the energy office and see what the status is.